Volrath the Shapestealer versus Gargos Vicious Watcher, Akiri Line-Slinger, and Cyrus Renn, Seeker Adept, and Krenko Tin Street Kingpin. We're keeping that. We've got green into 3 visits next turn, so that will put us on Sultai. I'm probably going for the Merfolk Skydiver after that. Nothing too crazy going on in the early stages. Got down a turn 1 Llanowar Elves, so Gargos is obviously trying to ramp up to their commander. This, if it is the Hydra tribal build, is much better as soon as you get your commander into play. And I'd also like to mention that Damon863 is a friend of the channel, running Krenko Tin Street Kingpin. I had a short stint of running Akiri in 1 vs 1, and you can't run partners in 1 vs 1, so I sometimes forget that that is a partner commander. It's strange seeing Akiri with someone else in the command zone. And the partners have gone for an Ether Spellbomb. Gargos following things up with the Wood Elves, so that will put them on at least 4 mana next turn. And do we want the Simic Signet or the 3 visits? Simic Signet will not tap for mana. I don't think it really matters. We'll just go for a tap land with 3 visits here. So let's just go Breeding Pool and pass the turn. And the first commander of the game coming down, Silas Renn, or Silas Renn, I don't know how you pronounce that. And they're going to be able to return the Spell Bomb, assuming that that gets through, which it most likely will. Although we are getting down a creature next turn, but I don't think... No, we might block that, I don't know. The Wood Elves is going in at Krenko. Now they're doubling Season. We've got a 4th land to make, so we'll definitely get down the Simic Signet. And then we will make Simic and go for the Merfolk Skydiver. And I think we're just going to be allowing the Silas Renn to hit us if it comes in. And they can have their Ether Spellbomb back if they want. Merfolk Skydiver will put a plus counter on itself. And then when we want to cast our commander, we can make it a copy of this. And it will make it into a 7/5 flyer. Hordling Outburst for Krenko makes 3 Goblin tokens, so they can chump the Dimir commander all day long. Also didn't mention that the first Hydra of the game has come down. That can't be countered. It has haste and pro blue, and it enters with X plus counters on it. Obviously when Gargos is in play, that will enter with at least 4 plus counters on it, because the cheapening of Hydra spells does count towards X. Deciding not to swing in with their artifact creature, and instead just passing through to the second main and throwing out a Steam Vent. Then going for their second Spellbomb in Pyrite Spellbomb. That one is 2 damage to any target, and this one is Bounce a creature, and then a Dispeller's Capsule, so this is obviously some kind of cheap artifact recursion deck. This one is 3 tap and sack to blow up an artifact or enchantment. The Hydra's coming down thick and fast now. Vastwood Hydra. When it dies, you can distribute the plus counters that are on it when it does die. They've got 5 cards left in hand, and they're failing to make lands, so yeah, just having to fall back on hard casting the Hydras, with not as many plus counters on them as they might like. Still 2 mana away from their Gargos. Okay, I was hoping for a land there, but a Signet is alright, I suppose. Do we want to get down our commander is the question. I don't want to get down Doubling Season into this thing. Doubling Season will draw hate, so yeah, in that case, let's just go for the Golgari Signet, just to further our mana. We're also not painting as big a target onto ourselves. I'd like to get down our commander with haste, but I don't think that's going to happen for us quite yet. And we're a couple of mana away from Woodfall Primus as well. Let's just pass the turn like that. I don't want to get down Nissa, Voice of Zendikar. She's really in here to put a plus counter on all of our creatures so that we can copy each of our creatures with Volrath. Goblin Matron for the Krenko player. Search your library for a goblin and put it into your hand when that enters. And they go for the Goblin War Chief, which will make goblins one less to cast and give them haste. Particularly frightening with a Krenko of any kind. And at the end of the turn, the partner player decides to activate Pyrite Spellbomb to sacrifice that and draw a card. They're up to 6 now at the beginning of their turn. And then the first attack of the game, and it's coming in at us. We are going to give them the Spellbomb back. Not going to block that because we want to keep our evasive creature. And they do choose to cast the Pyrite Spellbomb. I think they've only got until the end of the turn to do that. Yeah, you may cast it this turn. And now Akiri Line-Slinger in the field, and that will be a pretty big commander. There's, 4 artifacts? Oh no, this is an artifact commander, isn't it? So 5 artifacts, making that a 5/3 with Vigilance and First Strike. Not bad for 2 mana. Still no land drops from the Gargos player, but they are continuing to get down their Hydras. This is the Primordial Hydra. At least this will get bigger as time goes on. Has its plus counters doubled at the beginning of their upkeep. Alright, we get into that land that we were hoping for, so let's drop that. And how much does that put us on? 2, 4, 6 and 7. I'd like to get down Nissa, Voice of Zendikar and Doubling Season on the same turn, so I think we're on line for our commander here. And Volrath managing to hit the field, even though there was blue mana held up, and they did pause there, so I don't know if they actually have that held up for a reason. And then at the beginning of combat, we can put a minus counter on something. I am going to put that onto Akiri Line-Slinger. Then we can give our Volrath First Strike if we want to. We can also give it Vigilance, so we could swing in with Vigilance, turn it into a flyer. Okay, getting rid of the Skydiver in response to that. We'll just allow that. We're going to hold up mana for turning our Volrath into other things if we want to. Unfortunately, can't take advantage of turning it into a Primordial Hydra because we only transform Volrath into another creature until our next turn, and by that time, Volrath will not be a Primordial Hydra at the beginning of our upkeep, and therefore will not double those plus counters up. So that's unfortunate. Down comes that Goblin War Chief that we knew our opponent had tutored for. And they can go for Krenko after this as well. It will only cost 2 mana. Yeah, so with all these Hydras and Goblins in play, wouldn't be the worst thing to see a board wipe. And the partner player is being attacked by Krenko, Tin Street Kingpin. Can't say I feel too bad about that because partners over here has been targeting us quite a bit. Most likely because we don't have many blockers to keep them off their spell bombs. And Krenko creating a bunch of goblins in the process. Deciding to block with Akiri Line-Slinger there though. And that does have First Strike, so looks like Krenko is going down there. Probably a misplay by our opponent. Unless they were just after the goblin tokens. No, it's not per goblin you control, is it? You get the goblins equal to its power, so they actually only got 2 goblins there. And that's a good point, actually. Damon863 has said that if Krenko's in the command zone, then we can't make Volrath a copy of Krenko, and therefore make a bunch of goblins, because our Volrath would be a 7/5 copy of Krenko, and therefore we'd get a bunch of goblins. Might have figured that out by the time it comes back round to our turn. One thing we can do, actually, is we can make our Volrath a copy of the Mist Cutter, and give it protection from blue. And then if this thing swings in at us, we can block without receiving death touch damage. Silas Renn coming in at us again. And I imagine they're going to crack the spell bomb in response to this. But at least they're not drawing cards with it, if that is what they go for. Just going to respond by making it... it's protection from blue, isn't it? So we can't target it with Volrath because Volrath is blue, so scratch that idea. Yeah, there's not really anything else that we want to do. Oh, we could make it a copy of the... Yeah, that's an idea. Let's do that. Make it a copy of Akiri to give it first strike. That was the first idea we had. They can still crack the Ether Spell Bomb and bounce our commander. And that turns that into a 9/5 as well, because we do get the buff from our signets. And looks like the Spell Bomb is being cracked here. Certainly is. But this is declared a blocker now, so I don't think the damage will get through because it doesn't have trample. I'm pretty sure that's how that works. Yeah, there was no damage dealt there, so that commander did not trigger. They would have to have bounced our commander in response to us turning it into Akiri before we block. And then the damage would have gotten through there. Still got 5 cards in hand though, one of which I think is the Pyrite Spellbomb. Oh no, that's still in the graveyard. Oh, Joyra is not good. Got a powerful player that we're up against here. Primordial Hydra doubling up the counters at the beginning of their turn. When this has 10 or more counters on it, it will gain trample. So Primordial Hydra isn't necessarily the worst thing to run out with only 2+ counters on it. Then an Animist's Awakening for X3. Reveal the top X cards, put all lands onto the battlefield tapped and the rest on the bottom in a random order. They are up to 5 lands. I think they were at 4, so they went up a land there. Or were they stuck at 3? I think they were on 4 mana in total, weren't they? I can't remember. Anyway, they're on 6 mana for next turn, so likely that we'll see Gargos after that. A Vampiric Tutor isn't the worst. I don't think we can get down the Woodfall Primus yet, can we? 1, 2, 3, 6 and 7. No, we're 1 away from that. I'd like to get rid of the Silas Renn Seeker Adept. I might go for Ancient Tomb with Vampiric Tutor. I'd rather not, but no, maybe a Black Sun Zenith is a good idea. Yeah, board wipe might be a better plan. And if we're going for a board wipe, do we want Volrath to die? We could run out Doubling Season to get rid of the Dispeller's Capsule. And then go in for Rhystic Study with Vampiric Tutor to get more card draw going. Yeah, I think we do just want a board wipe here with Vampiric Tutor. No, we'll just run out our commander. We'll have to pay the commander tax on that if we do decide to go for a board wipe, or if someone else wipes the board. Getting a land there would really have changed our gameplay there. I think we would have gone for the Woodfall Primus and killed this thing off. But we're left with a tutor at least, and we can have a think about what we want to do with that. I don't think we're going to make much use of a Joyra ourselves, so I'm just going to put a minus counter onto the Death Toucher here. If it's going to keep coming in at us, at least we're going to take a little bit less damage. It's not like we've taken a huge amount of damage so far, but that's exactly half of the damage we would take anyway. Krenko out again with haste. They're not going to be able to keep recasting him forever, even though he does have haste. Let's see if all the goblins are turning sideways now. We're up to turn 6 and there's not much attacking going on. No, just holding everything back. One of the more subdued goblin armies I've ever seen. A damnation, there we are. So it is in fact the partner player that's gone for the damnation. Surprised they ran out of Joyra if they were just planning on a damnation, but maybe they just ripped this off the top. So down goes our Volrath. Should have held off on that like I thought, but I really didn't think that the partner player was going to wrath the board. I thought they'd be the last one to do that. So that completely changes what we go for with Vampiric Tutor. I think Rhystic Study wouldn't be the worst thing to go for actually, although we could hold on to it and aim for a land into Doubling Season and Nissa, and then start getting out a load of plant tokens to chump with. Although the Dispeller's Capsule is still in play, isn't it? Alright, and straight after the board wipe, Krenko decides to fold. So that is them out of the game. And then just holding up mana. I don't know if that's counter magic or if it's just mana for the Dispeller's Capsule. It may well be both. They've got 3 cards left in hand. And the Gargos player is now not at 6 mana because they lost their Llanowar Elves. One of the reasons that I don't play Mana Dorks is for board wipe reasons. The Mana Rocks, like the Signets, are much harder to remove than creatures are. In fact, I think pretty much the only Mana Dork I play now is the Birds of Paradise, because it's really good mana fixing, tapping for any mana. But they do manage to drop a land and go straight into Soul of the Harvest. I think that's something that our opponent would like to counter if they had counter magic, but the fact that they didn't counter that makes me think that they don't have counters in hand. Decided to try and get into a land here. Okay, we just rip into a Damnation of our own. I'm just going to go for the Doubling Season to get rid of this Dispeller's Capsule. Because if we're going to go for the Rhystic Study with Vampiric Tutor for the card draw, then we need that out of play. So let's leave it at that and pass over. Herald of Kozilek coming down for the partner player, along with the Teshar Ancestor's Apostle. Yeah, that's a really good one. And finally, seeing Gargos, Vicious Watcher. Don't think our opponent is going to follow that up with another Hydra because they don't have much mana held up. You still need to put the green mana into the Hydras once Gargos has come down. They will draw a card off Soul of the Harvest though. Now Soul of the Harvest should be turning sideways here. And yeah, I think that's right that goes in at the partner player because they are looking like they're doing some dangerous things here. Oh, and I've just noticed actually that they've tapped out and not left up mana for the Dispeller's Capsule to get rid of Doubling Season. I don't know about that. So it turns out that risking getting out the Doubling Season wasn't a terrible play. Now let's have a look with the Vampiric Tutor at the end of our opponent's turn and see if there's any use we can get out of Doubling Season now that we know it's being left in play. We could go for Consecrated Sphinx. That won't make use of the Doubling Season, but it will draw us cards. And there's the new edition of Hydroid Krasis as well. How much mana can we put into that? We put 4 mana into X, which would gain us 2 life and draw us 2 cards. And then that would be a good target for our commander as well. I think going for the Consecrated Sphinx is a better idea, just for the sake of drawing cards, I think. Gets a blocker in the air as well. So we will play out the Consecrated Sphinx and hopefully draw a card, or draw 2 cards at the beginning of Akiri and Silas's turn. Whenever they draw, we'll draw 2. Alright, and we get into, would you look at that, both of the things that we were aiming for. Thinking of going for the Rhystic Study with the Tutor for the card draw, and we wanted a land as well, so that means we can go for Woodfall Primus next turn. Yeah, we'll just have to see what our opponent does first, and then decide if we want to go for the Woodfall Primus or not. Problem is, if they have the mana up, they can do this in response, and I'd rather keep the Doubling Season in play. Alright, deciding to crack the Capsule, and going after the Doubling Season. So that has baited that out nicely. Would have been nice to get down the Nissa with that in play, and put a bunch of plus counters, especially onto a Woodfall Primus with a minus counter on it. But it's not to be, unfortunately. And Nissa can still take the minus counter off of the Woodfall Primus anyway, so it's not like it takes us off that line of play. And then out comes the Silas Renn, and they get to scry 1 because they tap that land, the Path of Ancestry. So I'm leaning towards Woodfall Primus to get rid of this thing, because I have no doubt that it will continue to come in at us. And it might actually be an idea to try and get our commander down as well at some point soon maybe, because if we can put a minus counter onto the Consecrated Sphinx and then make our commander a copy of it, that'll be 4 cards per card that our opponents draw. Well, I didn't think Consecrated Sphinx would last until this turn, so that's really good. We get into Rogue's Passage and the Colonian Hydra. Yeah, our opponent isn't the only one running Hydras. There's a Hydra, really making use of Gargos here. Only 2 mana for a 6 mana 6/6 Tribute 6 Hydra. Say 6 more. Now let's see if anyone wants to pay the tribute. That is when it enters, if the tribute was not paid, you can have it fight another creature, so we are going to be paying the tribute here. We have a Damnation in hand, and this thing does not have Trample, so we can chump block that if needs be. Alright, but the partner player decided to pay the tribute cost. I think this thing definitely would have been fighting the Consecrated Sphinx, so I don't know about them paying the tribute, but hey, we'll take the card draw anyway from the Soul of the Harvest. And we get into an all-star in this deck, Tetsamok, Primal Death. That can put counters on lots of different things. Getting into a mana doubler would be particularly helpful. Then we can actually cast all these things that are in our hand. Alright, now what is this? Strength of the Tajiru. Multi-kicker, it's been kicked once. Choose a target creature, then choose another target creature for each time it was kicked and put a plus counter on each of them. And that means that Gargos is going to start fighting. And it's going to get rid of the 2 flyers in Tashar and our commander. We could give that Infect and put some minus counters onto Gargos, but... And then we could make our commander a copy of Gargos. And that would make the Colonian Hydra cheaper. I don't think I really want to show our opponents that we've got Infect, so let's just allow our opponent to get rid of the Consecrated Sphinx here. If we can manage to buff a creature up, such as something like a Colonian Hydra for instance, and then surprise our opponent with a Tainted Strike, then that could knock them out of the game really quickly. Now let's see who's taking the hit here. And that's coming in at us. That's 9 commander damage from Gargos. Might actually be worth a Damnation now, and we can save our Woodfall Primus. So let's go like that, and then we've got 4 mana, and 4 mana is a Nissa. Yeah, why not get Nissa out? We haven't seen too much haste so far. So wiping the board, going in for the Nissa Voice of Zendikar, and we'll just plus that up to get some chumps in the way. And then at the end of the turn we'll get rid of the Marsh Flats and see if our opponent has anything in store for us. Our opponent really wants the Dimir Commander in play, so I think that we're back on the Woodfall Primus plan. I have no doubt that that's coming in at us, and I don't want our opponent to get these spell bombs back. Oh, Zendikar Resurgent is definitely something to blow up though. That makes things tricky. If we had a sack outlet, we could kill off the Woodfall Primus and get rid of the Zendikar Resurgent and this thing. But I suppose we can block that with the Woodfall Primus, so it might still be the thing to go for. So we will lay that down, get rid of the Zendikar Resurgent. Got that in this deck, and I do know how powerful mana doublers are. And then Nissa can throw out a plant token. Now this commander can definitely go in at the Hydra player, and they can get one of their spell bombs back. I don't actually mind if they bounce this. We can recast it and kill this thing off anyway. Or they can swing in at us and we can either chump with a plant or block with the Woodfall Primus. It'll die to Death Touch and then we can kill that in response with the Persist. And then when it's got a minus counter on it, Nissa can put a plus counter on all of our stuff, therefore knocking the minus counter off of that. And that will allow us to do the whole thing again if we want to. So let's see what our opponent's doing here. They've got 4 cards in hand and 8 mana available to them. And as we thought, going in at the Hydra player, I've been intrigued to see what card they want to get back here. Going for the Pyrite Spellbomb. That's either for the card draw or the 2 damage. I can't really see what the 2 damage is going to do to them. They can't kill off Nissa, Voice of Zendikar with 2 damage. And Aetherworks Marvel. Whenever a permanent you control dies, you get an energy counter, and then you can pay 6 energy and tap to look at the top 6 cards and cast something without paying the mana cost. Yeah, that seems pretty good. Luckily for us, there's not too much going into their graveyard currently, but they do have the Pyrite Spellbomb in hand. There is a Pia's Revolution. Whenever a non-token artifact is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, return that card to your hand, unless a target opponent has this deal 3 damage to them. Okay, well that seems good with spell bombs. And speaking of spell bombs, there it is. They don't have the mana held up to make use of it, unfortunately for them. Thought our opponent was going in for their Golos again there, but instead going for Voracious Hydra. When it enters the battlefield, you can double the plus counters on it, or have it fight a creature you don't control. And we are going to kill off the Pia's Revolution here. It did fight the Woodfall Primus, so it's come back with Persist. Oh, and it's a non-creature, isn't it? Destroy a non-creature permanent, so all this time we couldn't have gone for the Silas play that we've been talking about anyway. Anyhow, we'll just get rid of the Pia's Revolution so we don't have to worry about things going back into our opponent's hand. And now then, what do we want here? We've got another coloured land there. Let's get down the Verdant Catacombs. And we'll go in for an untapped dual land here. Grab ourselves a Bayou, and then our commander is 7, I think. Yeah, that costs 7, so 2, 4, 6, and 7 would leave us with 3. We could go Rhystic Study. I think I'd rather go for Colonian Hydra, to be honest. And if we can keep Colonian Hydra in play, then we'll get a lot of plus counters on that thing. Now we can minus down and put a plus counter on everything with Nissa. That will not only make the Colonian Hydra more of a threat, but it will allow us to get back the Woodfall Primus if someone decides to wipe the board or get rid of that. Then we'll go for Rhystic Study. And could have held up a black there actually to go for 2 Texamok plays, but we'll pretend to hold up a fast tutor. Reveal that from our hand and put a prey counter onto Woodfall Primus would be good to make a copy of with our commander. Then I'm going to hold the Woodfall Primus back as a Rattlesnake effect, because I don't think either of our opponents is going to swing into an untapped Woodfall Primus. Now what we might be able to do next turn is we'll probably swing in at the Hydra player, because I think this is going to remain untapped. They might swing into a single Hydra from our opponent. That wouldn't be the worst thing for them to get rid of with Death Touch. But I think they might hold this back as a blocker. And if that's the case, we can swing in the Colonian Hydra over here. That will jump up to a 10-10. And then we could Tainted Strike if we wanted to. But I don't necessarily want rid of the Hydra player. Magus of the Will coming down. Until the end of your turn, you can play spells from your graveyard. But they need to pay 3 tap and sack to do that. It's part of the Magus cycle. And a Cabal Paladin as well. Whenever you cast a historic spell, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. They cannot pay the Rhystic tax on that, so we will draw a card. Getting into another land, so we're not going to struggle on those for the rest of the game by the looks of it. And as I thought, deciding not to swing in with Silas Renn. So we'll just have to see what the Hydra player does here. They've got plenty of mana, so they might be able to put another blocker in the way and dissuade us from swinging in with Colonian Hydra. Okay, Beast Whisperer they don't necessarily want to block with. They've got a lot of life, so I think they might just take the hit from Colonian Hydra. We'll say yes to Rhystic Study and draw a card. Miri's Guile isn't the worst. And a Hooded Hydra as well. That might be worth blocking with, because it can get them into some snakes when it dies. It'll only be 2 snakes though. We are going to draw here with Rhystic Study. Alright, Foe Razor Regent. Here's a fight creature, so we could get something out of the way with that, maybe. Whenever a creature you control fights, put 2 plus counters on it at the beginning of the next end step. Oh, and I completely forgot, we've got Rogue's Passage, haven't we? Yeah, completely forgot about Rogue's Passage, so in that case, we'll drop that down. We'll give... This is a target creature, isn't it? Target creature can't be blocked this turn for 4 mana and tap. We can give Colonian Hydra unblockable. Swinging over here and dealing effect damage there. And then maybe fight the Beast Whisperer. I don't think we've got enough mana to do all that. We'll just play it out and see what happens. Yeah, I don't think we're going to be playing any more creatures, so let's just minus down on Nissa. And that's just to put a plus counter on the Woodfall Primus, because I think I'm going to swing in here. Don't necessarily mind losing Nissa. We'll say the Colonian Hydra can't be blocked. Then swing in the Colonian Hydra at Flowbits. The Woodfall Primus at VV Mat. They are going to have their plus counters doubled up by the Colonian Hydra. In fact, the good thing about Colonian Hydra is that it doubles up the plus counters on all of your creatures, not just the ones swinging in. Okay, deciding to double block on the Woodfall Primus, and the Colonian Hydra obviously isn't blocking at all there. Yeah, we'll just kill off this thing because it's the biggest creature, and we'll leave the Hooded Hydra in play. And then in response, 2 blocks, we'll put the Tainted Strike onto the Colonian Hydra. And that will give that infect and knock the partner player out of the game. Then Persist will trigger, and we will blow up that Rogue's Passage because we've just shown how powerful that can be. Then we've got 5 mana held up. Let's go Miri's Guile, and we'll reveal the Tetsamok again. We can do that a couple more times. We'll put it onto our Colonian Hydra as well. I don't think we're going to be casting our commander again this game, but we'll see what happens. Holding up 2 blue mana seems good as well. Might show our opponent that we've got counter magic. They do have mana to cast their Gargos again. A Hero's Bane. Let's see if they pay for the Rhystic Study tax. They haven't done so far. Again, deciding not to pay it, so we will draw. Well, Cyclonic Rift seems like the way we're going to win this. Do we have the mana for Cyclonic Rift and Rogue's Passage? Yes, we have exactly that next turn. We drop a land, we can put 4 mana into Rogue's Passage and tap it. And then that'll leave us with 6 and 7 mana for the Rift. Then Hooded Hydra coming in at Nissa. We can give them the snake tokens. Do they draw with this or anything? When it dies, create snake tokens. Yeah, we don't care about that. We're about to rift all of those away anyway. Let's do some double blocking just in case they can buff that up. And that just dies. There was no combat shenanigans going on there. Let's have a look at the top with Miri's Guile. Don't think it really matters what we draw into here. Wasteland Contagion Clasp seems okay. Yeah, let's just draw into the Contagion Clasp there. We go for Woodland Cemetery. Plus Nissa. Oh, and what was I thinking before? If we overload Cyclonic Rift, we don't need to tap for the Rogue's Passage, do we? Yeah, that's me being brain dead. So let's just go in for the Rift here. I think we might actually have enough damage on board with all these plus counters alone. And we've got 24 damage with the Hydra alone, and then these will get buffed up to 8 9s. So yeah, we should have more than enough to beat out our opponent here. And it looks like they are going to graciously take it. And they certainly are, so big props to my opponent for that. Yeah, I didn't see too much of our commander there, unfortunately. Typically the case in this deck, I do have some haste enablers in here, but Sultai isn't the best at enabling haste. I don't really want to put the... what is that enchantment that only costs 1 mana? I can't remember, I'll put it up on screen. But I don't really want to put that in because it gives everything haste. And that way madness lies. So, unfortunately, like I said, not seeing too much from our commander there. But this is just a general counters build. So we can make use of our counter effects without our commander being in play. Would have been nice to have 2 Colonian Hydras swinging around for lethal commander damage though, but anyway, there we are. Hopefully you all enjoyed this Volrath the Shapestealer game. I'm tribalkai on the EDH channel. Thank you for watching.